Meghan believed the gates of Balmoral might be difficult to pass, but she never imagined her name would disappear before she even reached them. Without a public announcement, without a family discussion, and without a warning from King Charles, Prince William quietly authorized her removal from the Balmoral estate access list. When confirmation arrived, the decision felt larger than a cancelled invitation. It felt like the monarchy had erased the final doorway connecting her to royal family life. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Meghan stood beside the dining table in California and read the message twice. She placed the phone face down and looked at Harry. Balmoral was more than a Scottish residence. It was the private retreat where the family guarded memories and tested relationships beyond ceremony. The estate access list was the internal register controlling guests, rooms, vehicles, security clearance, and arrival dates. Her name had vanished from every part of it. Harry stared at the confirmation and refused to accept it. He insisted William could not have acted alone on this. Then a second message arrived. The prince had personally approved the amendment and ordered that no exception be granted without his written authorization. Harry's disbelief hardened into anger. Meghan asked whether his brother had decided she no longer belonged anywhere connected to the crown, and he could not soften the truth. William had moved before either of them knew a review was underway. Earlier, he instructed Balmoral's estate office to delete Meghan from the entry register, accommodation schedule, vehicle permissions, and security notes. The future king aligned every department before resistance could begin. This was not a cancelled weekend. It was an operational exclusion designed to remain in force. Meghan opened the final attachment and found the line that changed everything: estate trust, household stability, and protection of private family space. The words described no punishment. They described a boundary. Worse, they suggested the decision followed a specific breach of trust, serious enough to close Balmoral's gates before any appeal could be made. Harry read the notation and remembered Catherine. Months earlier, a private exchange involving her had left William colder, quieter, and unwilling to discuss Meghan's return to royal property. The answer, Harry realized, might not have begun in Scotland. It may have begun inside a room where Catherine said something his brother never forgot. And while Meghan struggled to understand how one quiet instruction could close an entire royal estate to her, the deeper wound was already shifting toward the two brothers whose broken trust had made that instruction possible. The decision carried William's signature, but its emotional weight belonged to an entire family. For Meghan, it was proof that the palace had transformed distance into rejection. For Harry, it was another line drawn between the life he left and the family he still wanted to reach. Yet for William, Balmoral was not neutral ground. It was a final protected space, and he believed allowing old tensions through its gates could destroy what little remained. Harry paced across the room, unable to stop. Balmoral had always meant more to him than stone, land, or royal custom. It carried memories of childhood summers with Queen Elizabeth, quiet lessons from Prince Philip, and the crushing days after Diana's death. For William, those same memories had become part of his preparation for kingship, binding grief to duty in a place where the family could still exist without an audience. Meghan watched her husband struggle and understood that the decision had wounded him too. Her own history with the estate was far less secure. She had entered royal life as a duchess, a title given to the wife of a duke, and had been expected to master private traditions, strict schedules, hunting weekends, and silent rules no one fully explained. One mistake could be remembered longer than years of effort. Harry admitted that he had still imagined taking their children to Balmoral one day. He wanted them to know the hills, the stories, and the family history that had shaped him. Meghan answered quietly but firmly. William had not removed Harry's name. He had removed hers. She refused to let the exclusion become a vague disagreement between brothers when the official boundary had been placed around her. William sat alone at Windsor, with the estate authorization file closed before him. The document was the formal record giving staff permission to enforce his decision. Catherine entered, noticed his untouched tea, and asked whether he understood how Harry would interpret what he had done. She knew the younger brother would see the removal as an attack on his marriage, not an act of protection. William looked at her and answered without hesitation. He was no longer making decisions according to how Harry might describe them afterward. He was thinking about the monarchy, his children, the estate staff, and the private spaces they could safely protect. Catherine did not challenge him, but her silence exposed something deeper. She knew the exact incident that had transformed concern into action. Meghan had believed the request behind that incident was reasonable. William had seen it as the final warning. To understand why William accepted the cost of wounding his brother, the story must return to the precise moment when a private family request became, in his eyes, a breach that could never be repeated. Every royal rupture has a moment that later becomes impossible to forget. In this case, it was not a shouting match, a televised interview, or a public accusation. It was a private request made before a memorial weekend, one Meghan considered practical, but William interpreted as a warning. A proposed visit, an outside production advisor, and a suggestion involving Diana's old Balmoral rooms combined in a way that convinced the future king that the estate itself had become vulnerable. Charles had imagined something smaller. Months earlier, he considered a Balmoral memorial gathering devoted to Diana's charitable legacy, with William, Harry, Catherine, selected trustees, and one dinner away from cameras. Balmoral was the royal family's Scottish estate, a private retreat where personal gatherings carried more weight than public ceremony. The king believed the weekend might create space for grief without spectacle. Harry asked that Meghan be included. He explained that Diana's influence had become central to the independent work they were building, and Charles did not reject him. That hesitation mattered. To Harry, it sounded like hope. To Meghan, it suggested that one careful request could reopen a door. Meghan then asked whether a documentary consultant could travel to Scotland and help record private reflections about Diana's influence. She also requested temporary access to the corridor near rooms once associated with the late princess, promising nothing would be filmed without approval. A documentary consultant was an outside advisor who helped shape recorded material. Meghan saw practical planning. William saw private mourning drifting toward production. Catherine read the request in William's office and became still. She placed the page down and said, Diana's memory could not become material gathered during a family memorial, however respectful the intention sounded. William heard more than concern. He heard a boundary being named. Harry called without aids and insisted the request had been misunderstood. William answered that introducing an outside advisor before reconciliation began proved the weekend was already being viewed through future content. The brothers spoke carefully, but every sentence tightened the distance between them. William ended the call, summoned Balmoral's chief administrator, and ordered a review of standing and discretionary access, meaning permanent and case-by-case permission to enter the estate. He stopped short of removing Meghan, yet circled her name with a black pen. Then the final detail arrived. The consultant's name had already been passed informally to a logistics coordinator before family approval. William believed the boundary had been tested in advance. The disagreement was no longer verbal. But when Meghan discovered that one unapproved logistical inquiry had become the foundation for her exclusion, she refused to let William's decision stand without confronting the man who had made it. There were no courtiers in the room, no polished statements, and no palace official prepared to soften the language. When Meghan finally reached William, the conversation opened with controlled formality and collapsed within minutes into something far more personal. She demanded to know how a future king could remove a member of the family without hearing her explanation. William answered that explanations had already been offered, and that Balmoral would no longer be used to test royal boundaries. Harry had arranged the private video call after every direct message between the two households failed. William joined from a small sitting room at Windsor, while Meghan and Harry sat side by side without advisors. Windsor was one of the monarchy's principal residences, used for both family life and official duty. That setting gave the call weight. This was no casual dispute. It was a confrontation inside the machinery of royal authority. William confirmed the decision immediately. Meghan's removal was active, indefinite, and already being enforced. He warned them not to contact Balmoral employees, because the staff had not made the choice and would not be pressured to reverse it. Balmoral's access procedure was the internal system deciding who could enter, stay, travel through secured areas, or receive case-by-case permission. Meghan leaned toward the screen and asked whether Catherine had demanded the ban. William's face tightened. He said his wife had asked for no one's removal and warned Meghan not to blame her, simply because she had defended Diana's privacy. Meghan held his gaze, but the accusation had changed the temperature of the call. Harry cut in. He accused his brother of humiliating Meghan to prove that authority now belonged to him. William answered that Harry treated every boundary as humiliation whenever it stopped his household from controlling the terms of contact. The words landed hard, because neither brother was speaking only about Balmoral anymore. Meghan then produced earlier correspondence, showing Charles had remained open to her attendance. She asked whether William had overruled the king or acted before his father could decide. He replied that responsibility for long-term estate continuity, the planning that protected Balmoral's staff, security, and private family spaces across future reigns, had already been delegated to him. He needed no new permission to withdraw discretionary access. William paused before ending the call. The review, he said, had uncovered something else. Private guest information had left Balmoral's internal planning system. Harry froze, realizing the next revelation could turn an argument into a question of institutional trust. The confrontation ended with a dark screen, but William's final warning shifted the crisis away from wounded feelings and toward the hidden machinery that had given him the power to act. William's decision shocked Meghan because it appeared sudden, but the authority behind it had been accumulating for years. Balmoral belonged to the private world of the monarch, yet the future of the estate could not wait for another reign to begin. Charles had quietly transferred significant operational oversight to his eldest son, trusting him to protect its continuity. That delegation placed William in control of the very list Meghan assumed only the king could change. Charles understood why the decision felt ruthless. Balmoral was privately owned, not held as a public crown property, which meant its household could be governed through internal estate rules rather than public royal procedure. Guest approval depended on trust, security judgment, and delegated family authority. Years earlier, the king had begun giving William responsibility for succession planning, staff stability, security coordination, and the protection of private family spaces. The file now sat before Charles in his study. He removed his glasses, pressed 2 fingers against his forehead, and asked his private secretary whether William understood how the action would cut Harry. The monarch knew the answer. His heir understood perfectly. That was what made the decision harder, not easier. Charles felt trapped between fatherhood and duty. Reversing the removal would weaken William at the moment he was being prepared to carry authority. Accepting it could widen a fracture the king had failed to heal for years. Every path carried loss, and the silence in the room made that truth impossible to escape. For Charles, this was no administrative dispute. It was a judgment on the family he had struggled to hold together. Then the review produced its most dangerous finding. A preliminary memorial itinerary had been repeated outside the family before the weekend was finalized. The details included a private dinner window and references to rooms connected to Diana. No evidence proved Meghan had released them herself. Yet the information had traveled through a communications chain linked to the same outside advisor connected to her Balmoral proposal. William focused on control, not accusation. To him, the source mattered less than the fact that private planning had escaped before permission existed. Succession planning, the preparation that prevents chaos when one monarch gives way to the next, required him to act before uncertainty became precedent. Charles refused to overturn the removal. Instead, he ordered that Harry receive a separate invitation under strict conditions, with access granted to him alone. The compromise sounded compassionate, but it carried a brutal demand: enter Balmoral without Meghan, or remain outside beside her. Charles believed a separate invitation might preserve his bond with Harry, yet the compromise instead turned one woman's removal into a devastating test of marital loyalty. The envelope offered Harry exactly what he had once claimed to want: a private path back to Balmoral, a conversation with his father, and time away from the machinery of public conflict. But one name was missing. Meghan was not included, and no spouse exemption would be granted. The invitation did not simply ask Harry to visit Scotland. It asked him to cross a royal threshold that had been deliberately closed to his wife. Harry stood at the kitchen counter with the formal invitation open beneath his hands. Charles's private secretary had sent it on the king's behalf, offering a short father and son visit during a quiet period at Balmoral. A private secretary was the senior aide who managed confidential royal business and communication. Security, accommodation, and uninterrupted time with his father had all been arranged away from official engagements. Meghan watched him reach the separate note. The invitation was personal, could not be transferred, and could not be expanded. Her access status remained unchanged. No meeting with William was promised. Harry read the final paragraph, folded the letter once, then again, and left it beneath his hand without speaking. Balmoral mattered because it represented Harry's childhood as well as the institution he had left behind. Returning could offer a final bridge to his father, but arriving alone might confirm that the family accepted only the version of him detached from Meghan. Meghan broke the silence carefully. She told him she would not order him to refuse, because any demand from her could later be used as proof that she had kept him away. Her calmness made the choice crueler. Harry could hear the pain she was containing, and she could see the fear he was trying to hide. Harry admitted that part of him wanted to go. He did not accept William's action, but he feared losing Charles before their relationship could be repaired. Meghan answered that Balmoral seemed willing to welcome him only after separating him from the life he had chosen. For her, the invitation offered reconciliation at the price of erasure. Across the Atlantic, palace staff prepared a room despite receiving no acceptance. William ordered that they avoid the bedroom once associated with the Sussexes. The instruction was small but unmistakable. Even if Harry returned, the old arrangement would not return with him. Harry finally requested a private conversation with Charles, with no secretaries, advisors, or brother present. He needed to know whether the king merely tolerated the exclusion or had quietly supported it. The invitation remained unanswered as father and son prepared to speak directly, and for the first time, Harry would hear the painful truth without William standing between them. Harry entered the conversation, expecting his father to blame procedure, security, or William's expanding responsibilities. Instead, Charles gave him something far more difficult: agreement. Without courtiers present, the king admitted that he had reviewed the reasons behind Meghan's removal and decided not to reverse it. His voice carried no triumph and no anger, only exhaustion. The father Harry hoped would overrule his brother had concluded that Balmoral could no longer survive another cycle of private access, followed by public conflict. Charles dismissed his private secretary and closed the study door himself. The secure video connection, an encrypted link used for confidential royal conversations, left father and son alone. Harry asked the question that had haunted him since the invitation arrived. Had William acted against the king's wishes? Charles answered no. His heir made the decision, but the monarch reviewed it afterward and allowed it to stand. Harry lowered his eyes and said Meghan would see the removal as proof she had never been accepted. Charles gripped the arm of his chair before replying. Acceptance, he said, was not the same as unrestricted access. Balmoral mattered because it held the family's most private memories, and because its staff could not be asked to manage another visit, overshadowed by suspicion. Charles then admitted his own failure. He had postponed boundaries to preserve relationships, hoping time would soften anger. Instead, every delay deepened resentment and left William believing he would inherit not only the crown, but every unresolved family crisis. The king knew that truth wounded Harry, yet he refused to disguise it. Harry answered that the family demanded trust while treating Meghan like a threat. Charles said trust could not be restored by opening gates alone. It required private moments to remain private, even when those moments could strengthen a public story. He had approved the separate invitation because he still wanted his younger son in his life. But he would not force William, Catherine, or Balmoral's staff to ignore their fears. Harry finally refused the visit under its current terms, yet he did not destroy the invitation. He asked his father to leave open the possibility of meeting elsewhere, without conditions designed around Meghan's absence. Charles agreed, though the pain in his face made clear that agreement was not relief. Harry sat in silence after the screen dimmed, understanding that his father had chosen a boundary over immediate reunion. For the first time, refusal came without accusation, threat, or public retaliation from either wounded side now. Their conversation ended without reunion, but the absence of anger created a fragile dignity, one that would be tested when the private access decision suddenly became tomorrow morning's largest royal headline. By sunrise, a decision made quietly inside the royal household had become a national spectacle. Meghan's missing name was no longer an internal security detail. It was a symbol onto which the public projected every unresolved argument about race, loyalty, privacy, marriage, and royal power. Some saw William protecting his family. Others saw the monarchy closing ranks against an outsider. But one newspaper image captured the story more powerfully than any palace statement could. News reached broadcasters after a source familiar with Balmoral scheduling confirmed Meghan no longer held discretionary estate clearance. That clearance was case-by-case permission to enter or stay on the private estate, separate from a permanent family right. Palace communications refused to discuss guest arrangements, but silence only sharpened the dispute. William's supporters called the removal a necessary boundary after years of damaged trust. Meghan's defenders called it exclusion, hidden behind administration. A London newspaper then published the image that defined the morning. Balmoral's iron gates filled the front page beneath 4 words, "The name left out." Beside them sat a smaller photograph of Meghan arriving at an earlier royal engagement, smiling as she entered public duty. The contrast was brutal. One image showed welcome, the other showed a gate now closed. Catherine saw the front page at breakfast with William and turned it face down before their children entered. She felt no shame about protecting private space, but she refused to let an adult family wound become part of their mourning. William watched her hand remain on the paper and understood that his decision had followed them home. Outside Buckingham Palace, a crowd gathered behind the barriers. One woman held a sign reading, "Privacy is not punishment." Another stood away with the words, "A family should not need a security list." Buckingham Palace was the monarch's London residence, making the gathering more than a protest. It placed public anger at the symbolic front door of the crown. A respected royal broadcaster changed the argument with one sentence. During a live report, she described the crisis not as Meghan against the monarchy, but as the first visible display of William exercising king-like authority while Charles still reigned. Succession, the planned transfer of the crown and its responsibilities, had suddenly entered the story. William refused every demand for a personal explanation. Instead, he authorized a brief statement declaring that Balmoral's private spaces would be governed by trust, continuity, and the welfare of the next generation. The language defended the boundary without naming Meghan again. As the gates became a symbol debated across the country, the family itself faced the only judgment that truly mattered, whether this boundary had protected the monarchy or permanently diminished it. In the end, Meghan's name was not restored to the Balmoral access list. William did not withdraw the instruction, Charles did not overrule his heir, and Harry did not accept an invitation that excluded his wife. Yet the true meaning of the decision was not found in who entered the estate that season. It was found in what every person was finally forced to acknowledge. Affection could survive distance, but the monarchy would no longer confuse reconciliation with the absence of boundaries. Balmoral's staff completed the seasonal register, with Meghan absent and Harry eligible only through a personal invitation. The register was the internal list controlling who could enter, stay, and move through the private estate. Once finalized, it turned the removal into settled policy rather than a temporary answer to public pressure. No headline, protest, or family appeal changed it. William accepted the damage to his reputation without celebrating the result. He understood that authority could appear cold when it was used to prevent deeper harm. The future king had protected the estate, but he had also wounded his brother, and that cost followed him long after the paperwork was closed. Meghan stood beside Harry as he placed Charles's invitation inside a private drawer instead of tearing it apart. She felt the pain of the closed gate, yet she also felt an unexpected clarity. Years of uncertainty had ended. She now knew that any return would happen only under terms built by the monarchy, not through affection alone. Harry chose his marriage without launching another public attack. He sent Charles a brief message expressing regret, confirming that he would not attend, and offering to meet at a neutral residence later. The king read the words alone, and admitted they were not the answer he wanted. Still, they contained no accusation, threat, or demand. He placed the phone down with sadness rather than anger. William's decision had never been only about access to a castle. It marked the moment royal reconciliation began requiring proof of trust before privilege could return. Meghan remained outside Balmoral. Harry remained beside her. Charles preserved contact without weakening his heir. The brothers were not reunited, but the conflict finally gained an honest shape. The gates of Balmoral stayed closed to Meghan, but the meaning behind them was finally clear. William had chosen protection over appearances. Harry had chosen loyalty over access. And Charles had accepted that peace sometimes begins not with reunion, but with a boundary no one is permitted to pretend does not exist. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.